Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Should I Access? Now, today we're going to take a look at Hellion. Hellion is a space survival open world game where you wake up from a cryo sleep and you're in an outpost where everything's sort of partially damaged and you've got to sort of fix things up a bit, get a suit on and find a ship and start chasing down oxygen, really, to try and survive. Obviously, that's the main factor, is you're constantly running out of oxygen, and you need to start going out there getting materials and, you know, selling these materials, being able to top up your oxygen and keep your own ship running. So, you know, when you first spawn, you come out of that outpost area and you head straight into, well, you can leave that sort of outpost area like I do, and there's a few ships, abandoned ships, floating around outside, and you can go and set yourself up in one of those and take some items from the actual outpost that you were in and move them over to those ships to get them like sort of fully functioning and working. And yeah, that's just basically what the game is at the moment. There's a broader horizon look for the game where it will come into sort of like a first-person shooting and possibly anti-gravity fights where, you know, you're sort of floating about with a few people and, you know, other people trying to get onto your ship to steal it from you and take all your resources and sort of pirating you in space. Now, so yeah, that's just sort of the game and how it looks at the moment. Now, on to the price point. I would say that £20 is quite a cheap game, don't get me wrong. I'd say it's a little bit expensive for the state that the game is in at the moment and where it is in its development cycle. I think it, you know, if they lowered it down to around the £15 mark, that would be good. They'd probably get a few more people on board that way. At the moment, it is on sale in the Steam summer sale. It's going for about £13 to £15, I believe. I think it changes regularly during the Steam summer sale anyway, but it is on sale, and I did pick it up. And yeah, I've had my eye on this game for a little while because it interested me, this sort of game. You know, the gameplay is sort of like Elite Dangerous if you could get out of the ship and float around in space and pirate someone else's ship, and basically what Star Citizen is aspiring to be, but it's just got a bit more of an apocalyptic feel to it because you're obviously running out of resources, and resources are scarce because obviously the story is that this human colony that you were part of went through a difficult period, and they basically got wiped out, and you're one of the few remaining people in the area, so you've got to, you know, make the best of a bad situation. Moving on to gameplay from the price point, it's a bit of a dodgy one, this, for me, because I found that flying the ships felt really terrible. And you've got games like Elite Dangerous where the flying feels very responsive, it's fast, it's nice, it feels good to actually fly one of those ships in game. And you know, there's also the other aspect of there isn't the slightest inkling of what to do straight away or where to go. There needs to be a certain degree of help during the first few minutes of the game, otherwise players will just give up and they'll be deterred from playing the game again, and, you know, that's it, they'll put it down, they just won't come back until, you know, that's their choice, obviously, but it sort of deters them away from the game, and they might not want to come back. They might form a little bit of a grudge, you know, because they don't have any help from the get-go, and that should be probably a top priority, is helping players get started straight away. Now, I think the game is sold as a bit of like a hardcore game, but there needs to be that sort of initial help from the game to get the player started. From then on, they can figure everything out themselves, but, you know, just get them started up, tell them how the ship works and how they can get it up and running and what they should do and a few things like that, and how oxygen works and everything like that would be great to know in the first few minutes of the game, instead of having to go off and read Gamepedia entry about it. And, you know, instead of having to go elsewhere to find the information, it should already be there in the game, and it should sort of guide you in that sense, and I think that's just one thing that the game's lacking, that will turn a lot of people away when they pick up the game. And then also with the gameplay, you've got some of the controls that are quite unresponsive. There's a particular delay with things like opening cabinets and opening doors, and sometimes doors lock up and they don't actually work, and you can't get through a corridor. There's just a bit of an unresponsive feel to it. Obviously walking around with your character feels a bit clunky as well, and I don't really like that. It'd be great if they could smooth it out a bit and get it sort of working a bit more smoothly, you know, just making sure all the systems work like inside an outpost when you're there, and things don't bug up and things like that, which sort of segues into my next point, is that there are a lot of bugs in the gameplay. You know, within the first few minutes I had to kill my newly made character and restart because he got bugged in a pose, because he moved from an area that was gravitized into a non-gravitized area, and you know, he was just sort of floating about in this weird pose that just, you know, I couldn't use anything, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't change anything, I couldn't even take anything off of my character, so I had to kill him and then respawn in the same area just to be able to get the stuff back off of him and move on. So yeah, there's a few issues with the gameplay, and quite a few of these issues will probably turn away a lot of people, especially since there's no sort of tutorial to help people get to know the game a bit better and learn it and get better at it, whilst there are still bugs and things like that, you know, because some people might not think about the fact that things aren't working in the game, and they might think that they're doing something wrong when in fact it's a bug, but they won't know that because there's no sort of information telling them that unless they go off and find it themselves outside of the game, which I think is a problem, because, you know, people have bought the game, they want to get involved in the game, and they want to stay in the game, they don't want to have to go off somewhere else to find out how to play this game. So that's definitely a major pain point for the game, and I think that needs to definitely be worked on. Another point to pull from the gameplay is that, again, going off the unresponsive feel, there's this sort of feeling that, you know, that you can't use certain objects. So maybe you're trying to repair your ship and like you need to put another warp cell in, you know, and you've got one in your inventory, but you just can't equip it to your hands. It just didn't work for me when I was trying to do it, and it just would not work at all. So there was just something that needed to be done there, that, you know, just to make things a bit more responsive and a bit more intuitive with the user experience there, because it just doesn't flow properly, and it really put me off when I couldn't actually maintain my ship on a basic level by replacing basic components, because I just could not actually get them to work and go into the slots that they were supposed to go into on the ship. I had to actually take the item, put it in my inventory, then drop it back on the floor and pick it back up again to get it into my hands to then replace that component in the ship. So, you know, there's that sort of thing that's going on where it's quite buggy, and, you know, people who don't have that initial tutorial, don't know how the game works, they aren't going to know that it's an issue with the game, or they might do, but they might also have doubts that they're doing something wrong and might think that the game's a bit too hard for them to play, and they might just give up on it entirely. So that definitely needs to be worked on. There are some serious issues with the gameplay at the moment. Now, moving on to the studio. The studio is Zero Gravity Games. Zero Gravity is an independent game development studio from Belgrade in Serbia. They're a relatively new company. I think this is their first debut game, and they're very passionate. They says that they're a bunch of industry professionals who have come together to make the game that they want to make. Obviously, that's basically the motto of any independent game development studio. And yeah, I mean, they are quite responsive. They put slightly regular updates once a month, it seems, on their forums. They're active on Reddit, and they have a Discord server, so they are communicating with the community that they have for the game, and they are putting out regular updates at least once a month, it seems, and that's pretty much everything on the studio, because they're quite new, so there's not much information about them, but yeah, they seem like a great bunch of people, and they are, again, simply that sort of cliche independent game studio thing, trying to make the game that they've always wanted to play themselves. So props to them. You know, they're a they're an okay studio. Now, finally, we move on to the potential of the game, and I'm going to say straight away that the game has a lot of potential because it's a great idea for a game, but there's a lot of problems with it at the moment, and I think possibly in a year's time it might get better, but I'm not too sure on that at the moment. I mean, they do seem to be updating the game regularly on a regular basis, and it looks great. Honestly, the game looks great. I love the idea of it. There's a lot of quirky little things with the game that I quite like, but everything feels quite clunky and it needs to be worked on quite a bit. It's an exciting game and I'd love to see it do well because it still interests me. It will always interest me because I love this sort of game, but it's the type of game that I'd like to spend time with, and that's the problem I found, is that I currently couldn't play the game for very long because of the clunky, slow feel of everything. The movement is clunky, and trying to fly a ship is very painful. The game's laden with bugs, which is fine because it's an early access game, but it should be somewhat playable at this point, especially if they're selling it at a £20 price point, you know, for an early access game. It should be in a better state than it currently is. So for my final verdict, I'd say right now, do not access this game right now. It's a very long way to go before becoming enjoyable to play for a decent amount of time. You know, I'd say just give it some time and it could be a real game changer. It might become a very exciting game to play. It might become a very big game later on in its lifespan, but right now I would not access this game because I just can't sit there and play it for more than half an hour at a time because it just feels too slow and too clunky. And you know, as soon as they smooth things out and sort of edge out all of those bugs, then I think they'll have an absolutely amazing game on their hands. But right now, it's not at the moment. So I don't think you should access this at the moment. Thanks again, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. I appreciate your views, and I would appreciate a sub and a like, maybe some comments down below so I can see what you'd like next and what you think of this video. So please do let me know. Thanks again.